Malaysians in West Asia reminded to be vigilant. And UN Human Rights Office say Israel still unlawfully restricting Gaza. This is World Today. I'm Brendan Nepal. Malaysians in West Asia, namely Iran, Iraq, Jordan and Lebanon, are reminded to continue to be vigilant and adhere to instructions of the local authorities following the reopening of airspace and resumption of flight operations in these four countries. The Foreign Ministry in a statement said it is anticipated that there may be possible flight delays as operations gradually resume and adjust to the new protocols. It added that Malaysian travellers are advised to stay informed about any potential disruptions and plan their journeys accordingly. According to Wisma Putra, the governments of Iran, Iraq, Jordan and Lebanon have announced the reopening of their airspaces and the resumption of flight operations in their respective countries. Earlier media reports said flights to the areas have been suspended since Saturday after Iran conducted a massive drone and missile attack on Israel in response to Tel Aviv's aggression on its consulate in Syria early this month. The United Nations on Wednesday will launch a $2.8 billion appeal for donations this year to help the war-ravaged population of the Gaza Strip, as well as West Bank Palestinians. According to Andrea Di Domenico, head of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Palestinian territories, the flash appeal addresses humanitarian funding needs through the end of 2024. He noted that the original request was for $4 billion, but considering the limited ability and space to deliver aid, so they chose to focus on those with the highest priority. The United Nations launched an initial emergency appeal for $294 million following Israel's strike on Gaza in October 2023. That appeal was modified in early November and raised to $1.2 billion to meet the most urgent needs of 2.2 million people in Gaza and another 500,000 in the West Bank in 2023. The United Nations has warned that thousands of Gazans face famine, particularly in the north of the territory, where distribution of food and aid has been limited. The United Nations Human Rights Office said on Tuesday that Israel is still imposing unlawful restrictions on humanitarian relief for Gaza, despite assertions from Israel and others that barriers have eased. Israel's offensive in the Gaza Strip has turned much of the Gaza Strip into a wasteland, with hundreds of thousands of people now displaced and crowded into disease-ridden shelters. The amount of aid now entering Gaza is disputed, with Israel and Washington saying aid flows have risen in recent days, but UN agencies say it is still far below bare minimum levels. Israel, which denies hindering humanitarian relief to Gaza, has faced increased international pressure to let more supplies into the Gaza Strip since it hit an aid convoy on 1st April, killing international relief workers. More than 33,000 people have been killed in Gaza and over 76,000 injured since 7 October, according to Palestinian health authorities. The UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, called for an increase in medical evacuations from Gaza, saying less than half of applications had been successful.
Israel continues to impose unlawful...
In other news, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's plan to ban anyone aged 15 and under from ever buying cigarettes passed its first parliamentary vote on Tuesday, although dozens of his own lawmakers voted against it. Sunak's plan to impose some of the world's strictest anti-smoking rules has angered some members of his governing Conservative Party, including former Prime Minister Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, who say the state should not interfere in how people live their lives. The bill passed a vote in Britain's Parliament with 383 in favour and 67 against, meaning it will progress to the next stage in Parliament where it can be subject to amendment. The legislation is one of Sunak's flagship policies before an election election later this year, which opinion polls suggest the opposition Labour Party will win. The Tobacco and Vapes Bill aims to prevent children born since 2009 from ever being able to legally buy tobacco, rather than criminalising the habit. It will raise the age of tobacco sale by 1 year every year, with the aim of stopping today's young people from ever taking up smoking. The legislation does not ban smoking outright, as anyone who can legally buy tobacco now will still be able to do so if the bill becomes law. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met China's President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang in Beijing on Tuesday to discuss both trade and foreign policy. Scholz's three-day visit to Germany's largest trade partners comes at a tricky time as the European Union is seeking to reduce strategic dependencies, dubbed de-risking, and probing whether Chinese manufacturers are dumping subsidized goods on its market. Both Schultz and Xi, who met for more than 3 hours in Beijing, highlighted the scope to intensify economic exchange between Asia and Europe's largest economies. During his meeting with Premier Li Qiang, the German Chancellor pressed the case for China to improve business conditions for German companies, guaranteeing equal market access, the protection of intellectual property, and a reliable legal system. On the Ukraine crisis, the Chinese president called for all parties to work together to restore peace as soon as possible and keep the conflict from spiraling out of control. Schultz said he had asked Xi to exert influence over Russia to end the war in Ukraine, adding that both leaders rejected attacks on nuclear facilities. On the Middle Eastern conflict, Schultz said he and Xi agreed the two-state solution was the only way to achieve long-term security and peace for Israelis and Palestinians. The Japanese yen and the South Korean won slumped to new lows against the strong US dollar on Monday and Tuesday. Affected by stronger than expected US retail sales in March and the situation in the Middle East, the yen tumbled below 154 against the US dollar on Monday, hitting a 34-year low. The yen's decline was fueled by weaker expectations for a US interest rate cut after strong March retail sales data, which was up 0.7 up month on month, suggested a strengthening US economy. The persistent interest rate differential between the two countries also contributed to the yen's depreciation, with Japan maintaining rates close to zero. Japan's finance minister Shunichi Suzuki said that the Japanese authorities are closely watching developments in the currency market and are prepared to take all necessary steps if needed. The strong US dollar also sent the South Korean won to a 17-month low of 1,400 won per dollar on Tuesday. As of last Friday, the South Korean won had fallen by more than 2% against the dollar since the end of last month, the biggest drop among the currencies of major economies. Microsoft announced on Tuesday that it is investing $1.5 billion in United Arab Emirates-based artificial intelligence firm G42, giving the US giant a minority stake and a board seat, allowing the two to deepen ties amid the global battle for tech dominance. As part of the deal, G42 would use Microsoft Cloud services to run its AI applications. The partnership comes amid Washington's efforts to hobble Beijing's technological advances, with the United States adding 4 Chinese companies to an export blacklist for seeking to acquire AI chips for China's military. The United States has also been concerned over deepening ties between China and the Gulf states, including the UAE. Amid U.S. concerns over its relationship with Chinese businesses, G42 had divested its investments in China and began the lengthy task of pulling out Chinese hardware, accepting constraints imposed on it by the United States to work with U.S. companies. Microsoft and G42, in separate statements on Tuesday, described their assurances to the U.S. and UAE governments as a first-of-its-kind agreement to ensure the secure, trusted and responsible development and deployment of AI. Microsoft said it was binding. The size of the stake Microsoft was taking was not disclosed. And yet to come, Indian forces killed at least 29 Maoist rebels in gunfight. Stay with us. Before that, the first 7 jurors were selected on Tuesday to serve on Donald Trump's hush money criminal trial. As the selection process continues to choose a panel of 12 members and 6 alternates who can be fair to the former U.S. president. The judge also warned lawyers that he would not tolerate any efforts to intimidate prospective jurors after saying Trump, the Republican candidate for president in the election, was audibly muttering, while one of the possible members of the panel was questioned. Trump faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to cover up a hush money payment to adult actress Stormy Daniels shortly before the 2016 election. Trump has pleaded not guilty and called the case a partisan witch hunt meant to interfere with his campaign to unseat Democratic President Joe Biden. The hush money case is one of 4 criminal prosecutions Trump faces, which also stem from trying to overturn his 2020 loss and alleged mishandling of classified information. He has also pleaded not guilty to those charges, though the other 3 cases may not go to trial before the election. Jury selection began on Monday and is set to resume on Thursday after a day off on Wednesday. Opening statements could take place next Monday, but warn that could be delayed. The United States has provided assurances requested by the High Court in London to pave the way for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to be extradited from Britain. Last month, the High Court ruled that without certain US guarantees, Assange, 52, would be allowed to launch a new appeal against being extradited to face 18 charges. This means that he will be able to appeal for all except one of his charges under the Espionage Act over WikiLeaks, release of confidential US military records and diplomatic cables. Those assurances that in a US trial he could rely on the First Amendment right to free speech and that there was no prospect of new charges which could see the death penalty being imposed have now been submitted by a deadline which fell on Tuesday. There will now be a court hearing on 20th May. His lawyers have already described US assurances given in previous cases as not, quote, worth the paper they're written on. Assange's wife, Stella, said in a statement the US guarantees did not satisfy their concerns, describing them as blatant weasel words. There was no immediate comment from the US Department of Justice or a court spokesperson. Indian security forces killed at least 29 Maoist rebels in a gun battle in the central state of Chhattisgarh on Tuesday. Kanker district, where the clash occurred, will vote in the second of 7 phases in the elections on 26 April, while neighbouring Bastar, a Maoist stronghold, votes in the first phase on Friday as current Prime Minister Narendra Modi seeks a 3rd term. Maoists, who ascribe to a form of communism propagated by late Chinese leader Mao Zedong, have waged a guerrilla-style struggle against the government. They say they are fighting to give poor Indian farmers and landless labourers more control over their land and a greater claim to its minerals currently exploited by major mining companies. Police officials said they received a tip-off about the presence of Maoists in the area on Tuesday and launched a raid that led to the gun battle, which also injured 3 members of the security forces. Indian Home Minister Amit Shah, while campaigning in Chhattisgarh on Sunday, vowed to eliminate insurgency from the state within 3 years if Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, is voted back into power. More than 2,000 houses were flooded in Kazakhstan northernmost region as of Tuesday, while across the border in Russia, Kurgan and Tyumen provinces were also evacuating thousands of people due to the deluge. Water levels in rivers and swathes of Russia's Ural and southwestern Siberian regions, as well as adjacent areas of Kazakhstan, were still rising rapidly. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev arrived in Petropavl on Tuesday, where local governor Gawez Nurmukhambetov told him 10,345 people in the region had been evacuated as parts of the city remained underwater. The president had described floods across the north of the country as a national disaster on Tuesday and ordered his government to free up funds for relief efforts by cutting spending elsewhere. Meeting the evacuated residents of flooded areas, Tokayev have said Kazakhstan and its people were facing a disaster of a national scale and promised the government would provide care and assistance to all those affected. The Ministry of Defense of Kazakhstan released videos of soldiers building earthen dams and delivering drinking water to civilians in Petropavl. Kenyan public doctors, clad in scrubs and stethoscopes, marched on the streets of Nairobi on Tuesday, demanding payment of their salary arrears and the immediate hiring of trainee doctors, among other grievances. The Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union, KMPDU, which represents more than 7,000 members, went on strike on 15 March with the same demands. Kenyan public hospital doctors are agitating for a return to work formula, emphasizing on a collective bargaining agreement (CBA) signed back in 2017 that was supposed to address arrears the doctors have accrued from 2017. Doctors are also demanding the provision of adequate medical insurance cover for themselves and their dependents. They also want the government to address frequent delays in salary payments and to start paying doctors who work in public hospitals as part of their higher degree courses. A previous walkout in 2017 lasted 3 months, and some doctors in individual hospitals downed their tools at various times during the COVID-19 pandemic to protest at a lack of personal protective equipment and over other grievances. Coming up next in sports, Barcelona and Atletico Madrid knocked out of Champions League. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In football, Kylian Mbappe struck twice as Paris Saint-Germain battled back to beat 10-man Barcelona 4-1 and book a place in the Champions League semi-finals with a 6-4 aggregate triumph this morning. Rafinha fired Barcelona ahead early on, but Ronald Araujo's 29th-minute red card turned the tide in PSG's favour, despite the Spanish champions leading by 2 goals following a 3-2 quarter-final first-leg win. Ousmane Dembélé and Vitinha levelled the tie for PSG, and the deadly Mbappe hit a brace to put them into the Final Four for the first time since 2021. The French champions have never won the trophy despite huge investment, but demonstrated they have the attacking weapons in their squads to do so. 5-time winners Barcelona were dreaming of a first semi-final return since 2019, but Araujo's red card for pulling down the relentless Bradley Barcola undermined their grip on the tie. It became another in a series of European nightmares for the Catalans, who last won the trophy in 2015 with Xavi blaming the referee. Earlier, Borussia Dortmund fought back to beat Atletico Madrid 4-2 in their quarter-final second leg on Tuesday, securing a 5-4 aggregate victory and a first Champions League semi-final since 2013. Trailing 2-1 from the first leg, goals from Julian Brandt and Ian Maatsen had Dortmund 2-0 up at halftime. Visiting coach Diego Simeone made 3 changes at halftime, including bringing on Angel Correa, and his energy told immediately Mats Hummels conceding a poor own goal before the Argentine netted to put Atletico back ahead in the tie. But those goals brought a sluggish Dortmund back to life, with Niklas Füllkrug and Marcel Sabitzer each scoring in a 3-minute period to send the Bundesliga club through. Former winners Dortmund, fifth in the German top flight and struggling to qualify for next season's Champions League, will next face Paris Saint-Germain for a place in the final at Wembley on 1st June. Atletico were bidding to reach the last four for the first time in 7 years, but fell at the quarter-final stage for the third time in 5 seasons. Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta said his side must change the narrative versus Bayern Munich, given their poor record against the German side as they prepare for the second leg of their Champions League quarter-final tomorrow.
We have to change it, and the opportunity comes there. There's a lot of things that we can do to write that story very differently tomorrow. We know that. And it's going to be about putting a very, very strong performance, collective and individually, to earn the right to win the semi-final.
Arsenal lost 5-1 on their last 2 trips to Bayern in the Champions League and have won only one of their 6 away matches against the German side in the competition. The first leg in London last week ended in a 2-2 draw after a late Leandro Trossard equaliser for Arsenal. Arsenal have the chance to qualify for the semi-finals of Europe's elite club competition for only the 3rd time, the last occasion being in 2009. Meanwhile, Bayern boss Thomas Tuchel said Bayern Munich have a slight edge over Arsenal in the Champions League given their rich history in the competition, but they still have to be at their best to beat them. Bayern have not gone beyond the quarters since winning their 6th European Cup in 2020, while Arsenal are yet to get their hands on the crown. With the return leg finally poised at 2-2, the pressure will be on Tuchel's team at the Allianz Arena. However, as Europe is their only chance of redemption in a season where they have been dethroned as German champions by Bayer Leverkusen. Still in football, in another Titans clash, while Manchester City midfielder Bernardo Silva said he and his teammates are motivated by the possibility of winning their 2nd consecutive treble, manager Pep Guardiola cautioned against dreaming too far ahead. City hosts Real Madrid in the second leg of the Champions League quarter-final tie on Wednesday at the Etihad, having overcome them in the semi-finals last season on their way to winning the competition for the first time.
To say don't feel this to my players when they feel it, I have a different opinion. We are far away from that hypothetical dreams. So we are in the final FA Cup when we are 1 or 2 games left with, 3, 4, 5 points advantage, and we are already in final Champions League. I will start to think about that. But before game against Madrid, we are, you see yesterday Chelsea how strong they are.
They also lead the Premier League standings and are in the final 4 of the FA Cup. Guardiola's team can book their spot in this year's FA Cup final with a win over Chelsea in Saturday's semi-final at Wembley. They also have a 2-point lead over Arsenal and Liverpool in the Premier League with 6 games remaining. Meanwhile, Jude Bellingham is back in his homeland as Madrid seek to exact revenge on Wednesday for their Champions League semi-final thrashing by holders City last season. Madrid boss Carlo.
Lo que hemos hecho en esta temporada, lo bien que estamos ahora, porque estamos muy bien ahora, entonces nada, me quita el sueño.
And in tennis, Rafael Nadal made light work of Flavio Cobolli on a triumphant return from injury at the Barcelona Open on Tuesday. The 22-time Grand Slam champion had not played an ATP Tour match since January, but dispatched the Italian 6-2, 6-3 in 1 hour and 25 minutes to reach the second round. Meanwhile, Brandon Nakashima dumped a raging Andrei Rublev out in the first round with a 6-4, 7-6 victory. The American, ranked 87th, ousted world number 8, who made 5 double faults and only forced 1 breakpoint in the match. Nakashima bashed his racket repeatedly on the ground before storming off. The Greek leg of the torch relay kicked off in ancient Olympia on Tuesday after the torch was lit for the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. Greek actress Mari Mina, playing the role of High Priestess, lit the torch using a backup flame instead of a parabolic mirror that is normally used due to the cloudy skies for the start of a relay in Greece and France. The High Priestess then lit the torch of the first runner of the relay, Greece's Olympic rowing champion, Stefanos Ntouskos. After a short run, he then handed the flame on to France's three-time Olympic medalist in swimming and head of Paris Olympic torch relay, Laure Manodou, as a representative of the host city. The flame will be officially handed over to Paris Games organizers in Athens Panathinaike Stadium, site of the first modern games in 1896 on 26 April after an 11-day relay across Greece. The IOC has cleared the way for Russian and Belarusian athletes to compete at the Olympics despite the ongoing war in Ukraine, but they will do so as neutral athletes with no national flag or anthem, a decision that angered Moscow. French President Emmanuel Macron also said last week Russia would be asked to observe a ceasefire in Ukraine during the Paris Olympics. The Kremlin said Ukraine might use it as an opportunity to regroup and rearm. And that's it for World Today this time around. In our top story, Malaysians in West Asia reminded to be vigilant. Till next time, I'm Brendan Paul. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thanks for watching. RTM, teman setia Anda.